So that's what we're going to build.
That's what we're going to build. I don't really know what it is. It looks like some sort of train app, even though it's got a picture of boat stuff in the background.
Take a train to the beach.
Yeah. So this is really cool. This is digital color meter. And it's a really great idea when you're dealing with solid colors to just, turn it on so you get the hex values first. And then just notice what your color palette is and put it into a text document. That way you just have quick access to what the colors are.
Yeah, this is what pro designers will do. They'll look at a palette and find all the hex values, record them so that they can quickly play around and try different shapes on the screen having different colors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll also notice while I'm doing this that apparently for whatever reason, whatever else I'm thinking, I can only really remember about 2 characters at a time. Watch how much I double check this. I'm like 6F, 8-3, okay. I type, okay. Was it, okay. A, okay.
Yeah.
And then I go D2-486F, okay.
Well, I don't blame you because hexadecimal numbers, values actually, are base 16, which means after we exhaust 0 through 9, we need to do something, which in this case is use letters, A through F.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I've really enjoyed? I've really enjoyed us playing ping pong to the hex level.
Yes. In fact, if you have a ping pong table or access to a ping pong table, I highly suggest you play to F, not to 21 or 11.
No. Play to an overflow, and then you switch off every 2. It's very, very, very nerdy.
Yeah. It's about the nerdiest table tennis game you can play.
That's true. That's true. That's a fact.
So you've got your colors.
Got my colors. Now I'm ready to go into a journey. I'm going to code the whole thing from scratch right now.
Okay, so we have debated about this quite a lot. The outside in versus inside out issue.
Right.
So outside in would be looking at the outermost layout and then building in the next level in, and so on.
Right.
Inside out would be, okay, let's look at each little element and put that into the context of what we think we'll be using one level out.
Right. And I mean, there is not a wrong way, but for beginners, what's important is if you're starting to change things and you're seeing wildly different results from what you expect, copy that stuff out and just work on that view by itself.
Yeah, it really is an ecosystem out there. Every layout is an ecosystem. The content of the layout really depends on whether or not you understand what context it's actually being inserted into.
Yeah, because all those things are being calculated against themselves. And so it's really easy to just change one little thing, not realize how it affects the rest of the ecosystem, and then you're lost. You're confused as to why it's not behaving how you thought.
Yeah.
But at this point, I mean, they've been exposed to all the different, kind of knobs to twist, and we're just going to twist them one by one purposefully, rather than just kind of throwing darts into the dark and hoping our layout just one day magically will look how we want.
Right. So here you're adjusting scale type?
Yeah. I want to make sure that picture for different layouts will actually scale and fill the whole thing.
So now you are building, in this case, from the outside in.
Yes.
Starting with your overall relative layout for the whole screen.
Yep.
And then we have an image view and another relative layout. So tell me why you made the choice for the second relative layout nested within the first.
Well, right now I'm looking at the super train currently and that little header, and I'm just building that. So I'm just trying to make something right now that looks like that. Notice that I'm using a layout height and I'm setting it to be 100 dp. Not because I actually want it to be 100 dp. It's just allowing me to kind of, for a moment, see how big that is that way. What's really important when you do this is you have to come back and change it. You can't just leave it, but it's a really easy, quick way to kind of force something to look the right way before filling it in with a bunch of wrap contents, because it's really hard to tell what you're doing when there is no content to wrap.
Right. So you're choosing the relative layout instead of the linear layout for the 1236 leaving Austin and the white block below it?
Yes. And the reason why is because we can't really see it right now, but the book button's on the right-hand side, and you know that text is a certain size. I want those things to basically be on the side, and I want the other thing to be on the top. And the proportions are not something that I'm kind of going for. I don't want them to scale. I just want them to be in certain places. So if that were to scale up in a really large way, I'd still want it to be at the bottom. And so that's the reason why I'm doing that. I could use a linear layout, but it'd be more complex, I think.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the creativity of this part of developing apps is just like, hey, okay, a designer gave me this layout or this UI view, and now I want to actually figure out what the most efficient way to build it is.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the other thing. There's there's the most efficient way it should be built, and then there's the most efficient way to build it. And one needs to tread the line between the two. Okay.
So tell me about the difference.
Well, I mean, the efficient way to build it might be to always use relative layout or to always use linear layout, and to kind of always describe things the same way. But every time that you nest a view layout inside of another view layout, it's actually inefficient because it has to iterate through that stuff twice. So it's easy to describe things in nested fashion, but it's more performant to not. However, we do not pre-optimize here. We wait until it's a problem and solve that bottleneck, because trying to figure out what's slow before it's slow is really just kind of wasting your time.
Right.
You really want to be deliberate about the changes you're making and say, I optimized that because it was too slow, not because, well, I mean, I don't know. I like to optimize things just for fun, but it's a different thing.
Right. So in this case, you're basically just adding these text views in, and you haven't positioned it where you eventually want it on the screen.
No, I'm just
order
looking
of
at
operations here. You're just getting content in first.
I'm looking at that text view and just trying to match up what it needs. So like we discussed before, like padding, right? Like we really want it not to, we want it to have some room from the content, not from the margin. So I'm kind of filling that in, and I'm not really testing that text color, but I'm just focused on that text view, trying to match that, and slowly but surely getting it then eventually into the right place.
And I noticed that placement is usually where you what you do last.
Yeah. I don't know why I do that.
Okay. I do it too. I mean, coming from a web background and designing web pages and trying to build those, usually placement, you either create boxes and then put the content in and you make sure the boxes are placed correctly, or you create content and then place the content.
Yeah, well, it's much easier if you have content to then see where it will go. I remember a couple times having issues when I was developing stuff for Gravity when we went international. We thought we were really clever about how we had everything laid out, and this is before Android. This was with something that was very custom, like Android, for Java J2ME, and everything was great and fine until we had to port it over to Germany, and their words are so long that all of our assumptions about what the length of the menus would be was totally wrong. So you really want to be familiar with like what kind of data could be in my view before you start making decisions about it. So I think that's why content first is a good idea.
Yeah. So you're working on the button here, and I'm
working on it from memory. I haven't looked over here. So I haven't checked.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think it was kind of like this. But yeah, I'm putting it over there and getting it ready. But I think at some point here, you're going to see me go like, yeah, I got to look at it.
Well, I think it's this process of getting as close to what you want as possible and then verifying, right? Like you go for approximate location and then you go for pixel perfect location.
Right. Except for in Android, you don't go for pixel perfect.
Okay, so tell me more about that, because that's anyone coming from web is gonna be like, wait, I want to get pixel perfect. How do we?
Okay, well here let's pour ourselves a little more here.
A little more apple juice.
Yeah, let's get into this.
Yeah,
Daddy's adult juice here. So when you try to make things pixel perfect, and actually I would disagree that web does that. I think actually they're the first people to deal with that. When you deal with stuff being pixel perfect, then you only have one size particular screen. What you really want all the time is for things to be relative to each other and proportional. So if you have something that, for instance, on this device here, this phone, the minute this scales to a tablet, if it was pixel perfect, then what does it do? Does it stretch the entire thing? Does certain things stay pixel perfect, not others? Which is kind of what web does, right? Where they keep things in the right place. But you really want to have a layout that describes kind of like what really is the point of why this is here. So like if something is like in the middle, right? You don't want to describe it like, oh, that's 400 pixels from the left, right? You want to say it's in the middle. I don't care how wide the thing is. Just put that thing in the middle. And the more that you can do that, the more that you'll just flip to another device and be like, oh, that looks great.
Well, I think what you're talking about is actually what mobile has done to web development, which is
so the responsive layout kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like before mobile, it was almost tending towards the ability to get it pixel perfect, because you could have a resolution screen and you could pretty much assume that everyone had a minimum resolution, and then you could just design for that. But now what you're pointing out is that with mobile devices, you don't have that kind of control. So to assume that you could ever have it is a fallacy.
It is. And that's where Android is actually very different than other mobile platforms like iOS, which has a very standardized aspect ratio and screen size relative to the few devices that it uses. Android is on so many things. And I mean, you don't know if when you make an app, maybe someone's going to be like, you know what, I really want to have that on my Android TV. Mm-hmm. And you know, if your app just happens to run out of the box correctly, you know, that's going to be another experience. It's going to bring people, to appreciate whatever you made.
Right. So it's kind of like in music, you know, having perfect pitch is not necessarily as valuable as having relative pitch.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we go over relative layout and linear layout. Mm-hmm. Grid layout, I think if people can figure out linear layout, they can really figure out grid layout, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that we don't go over, which is a big no-no, unless you have a very, very specific use case. One might be, for instance, an advertising platform. You want to stay away from something like absolute layout, mm-hmm. which is like, hey, my pixels are this and this. It's just going to get you into trouble unless you specifically have content that just cannot adjust.
In fact, intentionally you force it not to be able to.
Right. So here we almost have our top piece. And now also, by the way, with that, what you're going to notice me doing here, and again, we've used all the things that we were talking about. We used margin and padding, and we used the relative layout, so aligned to the bottom, to the right. When I flip through this, you're going to see, okay, this looks pretty good under these different resolutions. Not that one. Now, I'm remembering that one as well.
And you're saying it doesn't look good because?
Because the header actually went over book.
Got it.
In this particular case, if I wanted to, I could probably describe that layout better for a super small screen size. But after a certain point, you really have to say, you know what, I'm not supporting devices at that resolution. And if you want to, then you really need to adjust the fonts on the fly. And that's not what we're going over right now. Mm-hmm. We could definitely describe the layout to fit correctly if we wanted to. But for now, we don't really have the full gambit of dealing with device resolutions yet, so they don't have all the tools just yet.
Right. So when our students are building their first apps, what range of devices would you suggest that they support?
It's super simple. Support the device that you own, because it's going to be the one that you show people what you're doing.
Sure.
And then from there, it's actually very objective. You basically just go and see what the current version distribution and device distribution is for screen sizes, and support the top three. Once you have that done, then open up to different markets that you think are relevant. I mean, for instance, if you are like, man, I really want to support this high resolution tablet because I really want people to use my app for air conditioning kind of maintenance, and it's really, this is the perfect device for it. I mean, that's fine. That's a specific market. But when you're going for general, like, it's just basically like tackle the mainstream first, unless you have like a particular indie crowd you're going for.
Got it. So now you're nesting a linear layout.
I am.
And
not on purpose.
And I think this is going to get you into trouble.
It is going to get me into trouble. I want that guy out. I didn't follow him out correctly. And for those of you listening at home, you can avoid that by really tightening up. Like 67, 65 should be deleted. I would have seen some of this stuff if I had just paid attention. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to make the whole background green so I can be like, okay, where is it on the screen? I'm like, okay, well, it's not there. It's not there. This is a great trick, changing the color background to a bright color so you can see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Now I know for a fact I can't see that linear layout.
Right.
So now I'm trying to think, oh, well, why? If I had been building from the inside out, I wouldn't have had this problem.
Well, there you are. So working both outside in, which you started, mm-hmm. but having an appreciation for when to switch to inside out.
Right. And yeah, if I was in a real bad place, what I would do is I would just start deleting my code. I start doing a binary tree search and be like, okay, does this relative layout work alone? Yes, it does. Does this one? No. So even here, right, it's like layout above. I'm like, why can't you lay out above that? Oh, right, because it's inside of you. That doesn't make any sense. There we go. I figured it out. Yes.
Yay.
And there we go. Now, my linear layout is still very, very small because it's wrapping 0 content. So again, we do the trick where we give it some space just to see it. And the green, again, helps. It's like, okay, that's mm-hmm. definitely there. And again, now I've stuck that little thing on top. So that's why I did that relative layout first.
Right.
Because this linear layout I want to adjust, but the layout on top of it is really kind of a header for it. So it made more sense to describe that as a relative layout. Space. I actually recently only figured this out.
This was clever.
Yeah?
This was a clever hack.
So again, for those that are just coding along, one of the things we didn't really explicitly tell you to do, and I think it's because it's just so fun that we figured you would do it. And we'll be adding on more things as it comes along of what you want to learn about. There's tons of different views in Android, and it's just such a toolbox that has very specific needs. We're just kind of showing you the basic building blocks. And discovering and figuring out, oh, this is kind of new. This is a password box. It implements some properties and hides stuff. Like, oh, okay, I want that. We're not going to introduce all 200 of them, but this is one of my new favorites, space. It's literally just a space, and trying to describe some of this stuff without like actually giving it like an element can sometimes be really hard. And I love this because I can just say, okay, weight sum 32. Now I have 32 different sections, and now I can just describe not only what I want, but rather than using just straight margin and padding, which does help, but sometimes you actually want the margin and padding to be relative to just a chunk of the proportional space, and it makes it much easier when you're trying to replicate a layout.
One thing I just want to notice is that on line 80, that closing tag for relative layout doesn't look right to me.
No, it's just because it was over.
Oh, okay. And there it is, revealed.
Yeah. But you were right. It did not look right.
Yeah. I mean, I went over that with them, so I didn't want to be made to look a fool.
No, that's not going to make you look a fool.
Okay. Something else might.
Something else will make you look a fool. It won't be that.
So you're choosing space, your layout weight for, I really like this idea of just having like, we talked about relatives versus absolutes. I like having the idea of having an absolute within relative dimensions.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you really want to describe proportions. Okay, so this is something crazy I learned recently.
Yeah.
You know that America does this whole like inches thing,
Right.
Inches and feet, and
Yeah.
nobody does.
It's kind of lame, but yeah.
Except for one thing.
Okay.
You know where that's not lame?
Where?
Proportions. You know how easy it is to do things in thirds?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Because 12 is divisible by so many things.
And especially 3. You
Yeah.
try to do 3 for anything metric?
Mm-hmm.
So everything has like a particular place.
Very nice.
Yeah. So, but I love that too, because I mean, it's really easy when you want to describe like, oh, I want this to be like, 3/4 of, more like 7/16 of the screen. And it's just easy to describe it with those, those numbers of percentages,
Yeah.
So here we are. Well, what am I doing now? Okay. So I got my little sections
Mm-hmm.
and, oh yes. Now I'm going to start dealing with I saw this like little shining through thing on the side. So I was like, oh, I got to do that. So I'm going to kind of bring in the little side so you can see a little bit of the picture.
A little margin.
See that?
There you go.
But now my header is way too big.
Yup.
Gonna have to fix that. Just gonna copy and paste that one. Actually making layouts is actually really like, it's really calming.
How so?
If you know like enough of like the basic, like the building blocks that we went over, it's that short learning kick where you're like, okay, I just need to make this be a certain look and in the lower left by a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you succeed at that and you never need to go back to that. And then you do the next challenge and you slowly start to see something visually grow, but you only get to see it visually grow if you have this editor that's actually showing you what you're rendering in real time. Like if I had to actually compile every time I type this stuff in, I would probably just go do something like horrible to myself. I would just run into the middle of the street and I'd be like, this isn't worth it.
That would be the end.
That would be the end.
I'd be on my own.
Yeah. You'd be on your own without me.
No, but what you're saying actually,
that quick feedback is really
resonates with me because there's a it's almost kind of Zen, it's like a meditation. It's like, okay, I do this and then I discover if it worked, and then I do this and I discover if it worked.
Right.
And slowly but surely you kind of wrangle the whole design together.
Right. Yeah, and we're not quite at the level now. Android Studio is so far ahead of everybody in terms of a tool. I mean, it's just bleeding edge. We're not quite at the like drag and drop level though. We can't just say, oh, move that over there, and we should be there.
The WYSIWYG, so to speak.
And I know they have a designer in this one, but it generates a lot of code. It's kind of like using Dreamweaver back in the day, where when you should have just coded CSS by hand. But doing it by hand like this really is a satisfying thing if you don't get overwhelmed with, wait, I don't know how to do that. And I think the building blocks we went over are the ones you need to know. Yeah,
and it's so easy to practice. Right? Like they can just practice on they can take a screenshot of any app they have on their phones.
Oh, that's
just try to build it.
Chris Hazeman was actually the person who gave us that idea originally, where he was just like, hey, how do I get people better at views? He's like, well, how did you get good at views? I was like, I had to just do tons of them through Photoshop documents. He's like, yeah, just have people do tons of them through Photoshop documents. You'll get good at views real fast.
Yep.
So yeah, see, this is so much easier with space because I can actually visually see each piece and set its weight just as long as it all adds up to 32. And for those of you who are not here with us in the room, notice the blue squares that kind of pop up as we go through it. Sometimes they look like they line up, and sometimes that's a rendering glitch. Sometimes it's not. But just pay attention to like when you see a particular item selected, where it goes. This is really useful both ways as well. If you want to make an adjustment to something you see on the screen in your design editor, just clicking on it will actually just make you jump to that part of the XML. So you don't need to be searching through your XML for it. And likewise, when you're in your XML, what you're working on is highlighted on the right-hand side. And make sure that you notice that so you can take advantage of that helpful hint. So I'm counting the spaces.
Did you get enough space?
I think I got enough space. I think the first time that I did this, I didn't get enough space.
So You made all the spaces, and now you're inserting image view, text view.
Yeah.
That seems weird to me.
I did it in my head.
Okay, got it. You were like, you kind of measured it out, and
Well, I figured actually, well, I'll describe what I did in my head. I took that visual view and I divided it in half and said, okay, that would be a layout sum of
half
2.
horizontally or vertically?
Horizontally.
Okay.
And I said, if I were to have a layout sum of 2, each were to get 1, that would be half and half.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, what if it were halved again? And I said that my layout would be 4, and then I could see each quarter would take up that. And I did that process until I was like, actually, I need more resolution than that. I need 32 sections wide. And then I counted, what I thought they would be really quickly in my head, and then I put them down. But doing that on paper when you're trying to figure out proportions and just doubling it is a real quick way to get good proportions.
Cool.
Yeah. Because if you need more resolution, you just double it. You don't need to like kind of count it out and be like, oh, let's see, my layout sum is 17.4.
So gravity. To me, that's one of the coolest parts about the tools that we have.
It is really cool. It was really confusing for me at first. Like when I first came across it, I was like, I don't know how to program. This doesn't
you
make
had
sense
one of those
to me.
Moments.
Yeah, I don't understand how any of this works. I clearly am a failure at engineering. I give up. I'm going to go practice farming now. But no, it is actually really cool. Especially, the difference between, gravity is cool. Layout gravity is cooler.
Right. And what made it work for you? What made it convince you that actually farming is not your thing and you can actually still do this mobile development stuff?
I think for gravity, it really is a factor of putting something on the screen and then trying everything that you can do to manipulate it. So you really get that feedback of like, hey, when I do that, it goes over there. Hey, when I do that, it goes over there. And doing it in a context where you can actually see what's happening. But layout gravity, it's really easy to actually build apps that are too simple or too complex to come across a scenario to really try out and see how it works.
Okay.
But I always just think of it now as there's gravity, which is where content gravitates towards. Mm-hmm. And then there's gravity outside of where the content is. And that's layout gravity.
Nice. It's a helpful.
Yeah, I should
helpful tool.
I should put that in a haiku or song.
Yeah.
It'd be a helpful reminder. No, I know that's not really clear, but I actually look for the outward, the out part of layout to remind myself, like, oh, that's outside the view.
Yeah, right. Outer gravity.
Outer gravity.
Inner gravity and outer gravity.
Inner gravity and outer gravity. Actually, it would be easier if they had just said inner gravity and outer gravity, but instead they say layout gravity and gravity, and you're like, well,
no.
wait, what?
Yeah, let's call them up.
Aren't they both layout gravities?
Let's tell them.
I would write angry letters to Google, but I don't think they get letters. I think they just email.
And only from Gmail accounts.
Only from Gmail accounts.
Yeah. Well, we know a couple people who work there, so.
We do. I don't think that any of them will care about this, though. I think that they'll be like, yep, that's kind of awkward. No, we're not going to change all of Android based upon your whim.
Well, maybe if we get a few thousand students together, and we all approach them.
Read a petition?
Yeah. What do you think, guys? You down? You down to join us?
I wish that we could have them vote on that.
Yeah, me too.
I don't wish to know what they would vote to change it to. Or no, actually maybe I do. So also notice one of the things I just did, which was I solved a visual pattern.
Okay.
One time.
Yeah.
And then I copied and pasted it.
This is where it is appropriate to copy and paste.
Yes. Because if we were to have more elements than just 4, we would probably turn that into a list view and then describe it once. Mm-hmm. So again, anytime you're programming, once is always okay. Twice is suspicious. 3 times you should have refactored.
But here we have 4.
No. We do have 4, but we really only have 2 rows. Is what I meant.
Got it. Okay.
But you're right. We could have done this in a grid view. That would have been way slicker.
Well, maybe they could try that at home.
That would be really odd. If someone were to actually do this in a different way, I would just love to see how they put it together, because that was my process, but yours may differ. And here we are checking just to make sure. Notice how on a totally different layout, still renders rather clearly.
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot more of the picture too.
Yeah, I like it.